you. And we'll let people go down the line. And then you, if you have questions out in the audience, we'd love to take those as well. Cathy will start.
Hi, sure. I think for me, one of the really great things about this play is that it really shows how deeply interconnected so many of these issues really are. And I think especially one of the scenes that sticks out to me is when Christine is speaking with Siegel, right? And she's talking about who is the president of Sudan, and that she feels very connected to these issues, but she doesn't understand necessarily how they're embedded in larger cultural and political contexts. And I think this play really brings home at many different levels, looking at interpersonal relationships and also these larger political issues, how all of these things can be connected and why it's important to understand those issues. So for me, as someone who teaches about these things all the time in classrooms, I think that's where it relates to me, because I try and provide students with that larger context that they can understand.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Ekhlas Ahmed, and my family and I are originally from Sudan, Darfur. Darfur was mentioned a little bit in the play. I thought the play did an amazing job going over the struggle and the journey that you take from Sudan, Darfur, or from anywhere in Sudan, the refugee experience and journey from start to beginning to the end. For me personally, I thought it kind of told my life story since I left my homeland in Sudan, Darfur in 2003. And it kind of highlighted the big struggle that my family faced when we were coming here from the beginning, and also the people that helped us in the way. Organizations like Catholic Charities were a big help, and people that were helping us just understanding the new culture and the new environment that we're in. So I thought the play did an amazing job telling the story.
Yes, I'm Rosemarie DeAngelis, and I teach at Southern Maine Community College, and I work solely with immigrant, refugee, and asylum seekers. And I was really touched by the story. Having just finished watching it, you can appreciate that I felt like I was on this roller coaster of emotion. I was crying in 1 second and then laughing so loudly I could hardly hear myself think, and then I was crying again. There were so many moments where my experiences with my students, who I really become very close with, and many of them become members of colored community like Ekhlas. And our group is a group of young college students who use their stories and their experiences to teach about bias, prejudice, and stereotype. We will actually be here in the Studio Theater on March 15th at 6 o'clock. So the story for me, there were just moments when I laughed incredibly hard when she invited Gabriel to come for dinner at 6 o'clock, and he showed up the next week with another friend. And I often tell, the first time I had my students to my house for a party, I had 12 students, and I kept emailing them and saying, how many are coming, how many are coming? And there were 7 who responded, and on the night of the party, 30 showed up.
Hi, everyone. First, I'd really like to thank the playwright. What a fabulous play. Really fabulous. So I came here on Friday night with my 14-year-old son, and he absolutely loved it, and I was so tickled that he did. He knows that I'm a lawyer that represents asylum seekers every single day. I currently have 75 active cases on my docket. And what really touched me is, that I sit every day and hear tales of horror, quite frankly, and I have to focus on the legal part of the case. How am I going to win asylum for this person? But you often try to shut off the other part of it, which is, what are they feeling in this country, And, I got choked up many times during it, even thinking back 2 nights, So, thank you.
I grew up in New England. I've spent all my life in suburban New England, in very non-diverse suburban New England. I no longer believe that America should be a great melting pot for people. What I love about the work I do with the people I work with is how they crack my world open and never allow it to be the same again. Rather than melting everyone down so that they look like everybody else, I love the mosaic that we have going on here and how I can't turn around without it coming to me. Every now and then, and I do the same thing Jamie does, I do direct legal services for clients, many of whom are refugees, and every once in a while I'll be sitting at my desk and I'll have this moment of frozen time while I'll look across the desk and I'll be talking to a woman who was a herder in Somaliland, and the idea that she and I should be in the same room at the same time talking to each other strikes me as almost transcendent and magical. I love what our clients have brought to us.
I'd like to go back to that idea of melting pot, and I think sometimes I feel like I don't have the language, the words, the right way to communicate with people from other cultures, and so that sort of makes me feel a little insecure in reaching out. And so in order to better understand who are these people and what are the different terms that we use, because I know in our doing some of the pieces around this play, people would say, well, you're using immigrant in the wrong way. And so then that makes you sort of go, oh, well, I better not use any word because I'm going to use the wrong one. And to you as audience, I'd like to just say that we're not, hopefully we won't be doing that up here with the panel, that will be very supportive of people. But also just to ask if we could explain here in Maine, what are the different sort of categories of people who are coming over and how do they intermesh?
So probably three of us will speak to this. Ekhlas can speak to her own experience. Barbara will talk about the word refugee, and I'll talk about asylum seekers. Most of my clients are what we call asylum seekers, which, if they prevail, will fall under the definition of refugee, the International Protocol on Refugees. So an asylum seeker is someone that arrives in our country seeking refuge, but unlike the people that you saw in the play, they have not been resettled through the refugee resettlement program. They didn't come in with a quick route to a green card. An asylum seeker applies affirmatively for asylum within 1 year of arrival in America and then waits for an interview. If they do not prevail at the interview level, then they are sent to an immigration court. Here it would be down in Boston, Massachusetts, same place they have their interview. And if they don't prevail there, they could go up to the Board of Immigration Appeals, the First Circuit Court of Appeals, and all that sort of stuff. But it's a very long process, even to get your initial interview. Many people are waiting 3 years for their first interview. And most of the people arrive here without their family. And they often have a wife or a husband and children back home. And the slowness of the process is absolutely debilitating to many of them.
And often that wife or that spouse and children that are waiting back home are in some kind of severe danger and often hiding. To successfully get asylum in the United States, you have to really be in a life and death situation in your own country. And only a certain kinds of categories of danger will actually qualify you to be given asylum in the United States. Our laws are very narrow. Refugees go through a completely different process. First, they have fled their home countries for the same reasons often as asylum seekers, but they make their ways to camps where the United Nations is an organization that's tasked with housing them, feeding them, taking care of their medical care, and then for some of them processing them to resettle in other countries. The process, despite what some of the people in the recent elections have been saying, takes forever. You have to go through 22 steps of screenings, health screenings, security screenings, another security screening, a screening by the agency for the country you might be sent to. People typically spend anywhere from 2 years to 20 years in refugee camps waiting to be sent somewhere else. A wonderful book that's available now is called City of Thorns, that describes life not in the Kakuma refugee camp, but another Kenyan refugee camp, which is primarily Somali, in Ifa. In any case, refugees are then sent to a country not of their choosing, although sometimes if they already have family in one country, that will help them be sent there. Once they arrive in the United States, they're told where they're going to live, if they would like to receive support services through organizations like Catholic Charities, Lutheran Services, and so on. If they don't want to stay in that place, obviously they don't have to, but they do lose support if they go and live somewhere else. If they move from the place they were originally assigned to be resettled, they're called secondary migrants. And yeah, that's the situation for refugees. Please understand that in Maine, along with asylum seekers and asylees, who are people who have successfully made it, been given asylum, and we have many other immigrant groups. An immigrant is a person who comes to the United States intending to stay for a long time as opposed to stay temporarily.
No, I would just like to add, because refugees, as you said, they don't have the choice of living. Nobody wants to live in a war zone, and that's why they choose to leave, and that's what my family did. And the Darfur genocide, as we're speaking, it still goes on, and people are dying every day. Sometimes people see it as a play, but I always say, imagine if that was you. Imagine if this is your situation, if you had to start your life all over again in a different world with none of your friends, none of your family, not even your language. What would you do? So a lot of times you see a lot of our new Mainers here in Portland, Maine, and you see their faces at Whole Foods, Hennepin, anywhere you go, at SMCC, at USM, there's a story behind that face you see. So I like when people ask me, where are you from? What is your story? Because I want to share. I want to tell you who I am, because there's a lot of assumptions that people make about new Mainers, and people are here only for benefits. If we had the choice to stay back home, I would definitely have stayed back home, but it's not a choice for me.
To share with a couple ideas that I have, I don't have volunteers at my law office, but often people will show up with asylum seekers by giving them rides to my law office, because many of them don't have vehicles. People that are bilingual in French or some of the other languages that some of our asylum seekers use. Angolan now, there's a lot of Angolans, they speak Portuguese. That there's like Rosemarie said, that there's a lot of opportunity just to befriend people and see how you can help them, you know, and the more you interact with the asylum seeker and refugee community, you'll find out that they have some ideas of how you can help.
As taxpayers, support adult education in your community. Support adult education in your community. Right now, some of the adult ed programs are hugely underfunded, and there are waiting lists for classes like basic English, and people want computer classes, people want education, and we are not beefing up our adult ed to go with the demand. And it is a pivotal thing in terms of getting people launched in the direction they want to go in and use their real skills.
I also think just at a larger level, thinking kind of politically, that you can choose to make this an issue that you care about, right? That I think that coming back to this conversation about white privilege, in the play she mentions the idea that you have the choice to not think about this, or you have the choice to think about this. And you can convey to your local or national politicians that you care about these issues. And that in itself is really important, to make that choice, to inform yourself and to have a position, and to convince people who can actually divert resources and make decisions about this, that it's something that you actually care that they are doing something about.
How does one actually be able to live in this country? And that comes up in the play a little bit when they talk about how does even somebody who was born here has a hard time figuring out how to pay for food and clothes and housing, and how do you do it when you're coming from a completely different culture? And I don't know, Ekhlas, if you want to speak to actually having been there with your family.
Yeah, definitely. It's really difficult, as Gabriel was talking in the play. You don't have to just worry about the family that is in front of you, but a lot of refugees come here and they have so many people that they left behind at home, and they have to constantly worry about sending them just money for basic needs, just such as water and food. Living a rat life, as Gabriel called it, day in and day out, live the same like that. But it takes just a lot of motivation, to know that you can do it. I feel like for me personally, that's what I say to myself every morning, that I am capable of getting up every morning, going to work, no matter how hard it is for me. I just try to find a job that I enjoy doing, which I do now with my kids at Casco Bay High School. I work as an AmeriCorps member. So getting up and knowing that I see my kids and just being present with them at that moment helps me to fund myself and to fund my family, and also family that might need my help back home.
I might just add, Ekhlas was 12 when she arrived and did not speak a word of English, so I think that deserves a little round of applause at the very least.
Yeah. So to directly address your question about the process, for asylum seekers, they have to wait 150 days after the date they filed their asylum application before they can apply for a work permit. And they have to wait at least 180 days before they're eligible for it. And then usually it takes about 3 to 4 months before they're issued the card. So if you factor in the fact that you have to prepare your case before you apply for asylum, you don't just fill out a form and you're done. If you seek legal help, it might take you 6 months to a year before you even apply for asylum, then another 180 days before you can be eligible for a work permit. I don't have a single asylum seeker, and I've had many, many over 2 decades, that have ever wanted more than to not be a burden on the new community they're in. They're more than happy to work 40 to 80 hours a week to support themselves, not be on the dole, and to maybe send remittances back home to help the people that are in dire trouble back home. So I would love to see a system where you could apply for a work permit at the same time you applied for asylum. That would be a wonderful improvement. And I don't know that there's the political will to change this system. It's the wheels turn very slowly. But yeah, that's the process.
Most people, and Jamie can certainly speak to this, most people who arrive seeking asylum typically arrive alone because they're trying to find a way first to get out of their country safely and arrive someplace. So because they don't have sponsorship, they're not typically traveling with a family, so they're coming on some kind of a visitor visa, or they might be coming for a conference or something that gets them out, and then they stay. And they're here legally. I mean, I really want to emphasize that. They arrive legally and they're here legally, and they have 1 year from their arrival to apply to fulfill the asylum application. But when my son arrived, he arrived at the bus station and was at the Oxford Street shelter. And those are often people who begin with living on general assistance, because so they're looking for somebody from their community to help guide them to what's the next thing that I need to do to maintain safety. How do I get out of the Oxford Street shelter and get to my next place? And so I met him through one of my former students, and that's how he came to move in with me.
I'd like to take us back a little bit to Sudan, and in the play, I know Tammy was writing at a time when it was South Sudan was not a separate country, and we have an expert here on Sudanese history. So I'd love to sort of talk a little bit about what happened, what has been happening in Sudan, and then sort of close with Ekhlas talking a little bit about having 1 foot in this world and 1 foot back in the other.
Sure. I think, the history of what the conflict that really is the background to this story. I mean, the conflict isn't the center focus of the story, but it really provides the context for what we're seeing in the play. And it really extends back many, many generations. This actually goes back to colonial times. So during colonial times, Sudan was ruled by the British, who chose to rule it as 2 separate countries. There was North Sudan and South Sudan, and they concentrated development in the north, and even at one point advocated that North Sudan should colonize South Sudan because they saw these areas as so separate. And so this power inequality between the 2 parts has been ingrained ever since that time and extended beyond independence as well. And this has kind of continued to spark conflict between the two areas. Now we know South Sudan is a separate country, and maybe you'd like to speak a little bit more about the contemporary history, but this is really where we're seeing this. This conflict is really deeply embedded and deeply ingrained in global politics, right? It's not just a tribal war. This is something that is embedded and ingrained in global interactions and global power dynamics, and we continue to see those then playing out today. And this is not an uncommon story. You see this around the world in places that were colonies and now have been transformed into independent nations. So we still see the legacy of those colonial policies happening.
Even though the people of Sudan might not agree with that, because for the longest time we lived together as brothers and sisters, Sudan or South Sudan, and that's all we have known for the longest time. I just like to emphasize on saying that Darfur is in Sudan and it's not in South Sudan, because a lot of times I get questions, where is Darfur? Darfur is a region in Sudan. It's in northern Sudan. To the west, yes. So the genocide started in Darfur in 2003, and it's been going on until this present moment. Genocide between the Janjaweed, who wants to eliminate a tribe in Darfur, the Darfur tribe, the Four tribe, which the name comes from the Dar of Four, which is the people of the house. And some of you might know the history of Darfur, but this is where it starts of that. The government of Sudan, who are mainly Arabs, who are trying to eliminate this tribe from Sudan. And I was just kind of mention a little bit about my story, that having a foot here and a foot there, and being the bridge between my two cultures, because I lived in the US for about 10 to 11 years now, and I shared my story with Rosemarie, and I actually wrote a whole sacred story about being the bridge between the two cultures and being the bridge between the two countries, because that's what I feel like. I cannot forget that part of Sudan, because it's the essence of who I am. And I cannot forget about the part of being here in America, my second home, because it defines who I am as well. So Gabriel mentioned it in the play a lot about having a foot here and a foot there, and that's how I constantly feel every morning. Even today, like when I leave here, I'm gonna be going home speaking Arabic with my mom, not English. So I'm always the bridge between, and a lot of refugees and immigrants share similar stories of being the bridge between two cultures.
And I'd just like to, I don't know if there's anything else, but I wanted to just at least say before closing, back to the question of what can you do? So some things are really simple, like finding the places in your community that are small businesses run by refugees, immigrants. There are several Arabic stores, there are some Somali grocery stores, there's restaurants, there's a fabulous, Amira is a fabulous Iraqi bakery that makes the best Iraqi flatbread you've ever had in your life. That's up on Forest Avenue, just past the Tan Tan Vietnamese restaurant, which is also owned by another one of my students. But just finding those places and frequenting them, and doing something as simple as learning a greeting in somebody else's language. If you walk into the Iraqi bakery and you say salam alaikum, they will turn and say alaikum salam. They are so thrilled to hear somebody take a moment. If you learn a greeting in Kinyarwanda, it's bite, nisawa, to learn to say mafiantahai in Somali. Just simple little things so that you can greet someone and let them know that they're welcome, that you are acknowledging who they are as a person.